Most people dream of becoming millionaires. After all, wealth provides a lot of benefits, such as freedom, social status, and the ability to solve many of life's problems. However, 1 million doesn't have to be a dream, it can actually become a reality if you play your cards correctly. But let me ask you this question first. If given a choice between A, $1 million right now, or B, 1 penny that doubles every day for 30 days, which would you choose? Most people would instinctively take the $1 million. But let's take a closer look at the numbers. The penny starts off very slow. On day 10, it's worth just over $5, a far cry from 1 million, and it's already a third of its way to the finish line. But then it starts to slowly pick up. By day 20, the penny is worth over $5,000. While that's still nowhere near the $1 million mark, the growth acceleration has become more noticeable. By day 28, the penny surpasses 1 million, and by day 30, it exceeds 5 million. If you picked the penny, you picked correctly. But it wasn't an obvious choice. After all, a penny seemed so insignificant, while the $1 million option seemed far superior. Now, it's unlikely that you'll ever have the privilege of making a choice between those two options, but what I wanted to highlight here is the power of compounding. It's a process where investments generate earnings, and those new earnings in turn generate their own earnings. It's a slow but powerful force that accelerates wealth accumulation over time. And the higher the amount that is being compounded, the higher the returns. As you've seen with the penny, because the numbers were low at first, progress was slow and seemingly inconsequential. But once the momentum built up and the numbers slowly became bigger, compounding became an unstoppable force. So much so that if we let the penny compound for another 10 days, we would reach 5.4 billion, and if left for another 10, 5.6 trillion. And something similar will actually happen on your own wealth building journey. You will see that once you have a decent chunk of money, making more becomes essentially effortless. It's just the early stages that are the hardest. To better illustrate all of this, let's look at the case of Bob and how he managed to utilize the compound effect. While he might not be able to double his money every day, he found out that if he invested in the stock market, he could get an annual return of 10%. Bob started the first year with $0 and no prior investments. But over the course of the year, he saved $10,000 and invested it all at the end of that same year. Because he invested at the end and his money didn't have the time to compound yet, he ended the year with $10,000 in total. In the next year, Bob repeated the same process. He saved another $10,000 and invested it, but because his previous $10,000 investment had grown by $1,000, which is exactly 10% annual return, he ended the year with $21,000. In the third year, Bob invested another $10,000. His previous investment of $21,000 made him 10% again, which is $2,100, and Bob ended the year with $33,100. Bob keeps this simple process going for years and doesn't change anything about it. And by year 8, he finally surpasses the $100,000 mark. But something remarkable happens after that. Bob's portfolio starts to accelerate significantly, even though he's still investing the same amount each year. To reach $200,000, it doesn't take him another 8 years like it did for the first $100,000. No, it takes him just 4. And to get to $300,000, it takes him just 3 years. The reason for this acceleration is that at the $100,000 mark, Bob's investment earnings start to match his yearly contributions. His money is making money on its own, allowing him to build wealth faster and with less effort. By year 26, Bob's portfolio increases by $100,000 in just 1 year, 90% of which comes purely from compounding, and he surpasses the $1 million mark. The power of compound interest should not be underestimated, and if you're serious about building wealth, you need to utilize it. Of course, you need to remember these numbers are just here to illustrate an example. I've deliberately used round numbers to keep things simple. Your actual results will depend on many factors, like your investment choices, market conditions, and how much you contribute, but the principle remains the same. Now, even if you can't invest $10,000 right away, starting with what you can and adding to it regularly can lead to significant wealth over time. It's not about how much you start with, but rather how long you let it grow and compound. Take a look at this chart. This is what Bob's net worth looked like over the years. The green color represents the money he saved and invested, while the blue color represents money that came from the compound interest. You can see that in the beginning, most of Bob's net worth came from his 10,000 yearly contributions, while at the end, most of it was coming from the money that compounded. If we break down the composition of his first 100,000, roughly 75% of it was just from his annual deposits. But if we break down the composition of his 1 million, 75% of it was from compound interest. This is why you want to start investing your money as soon as possible. That way you give it more time to compound. Remember the doubling penny. The returns on the first 20 days were barely noticeable, but then the growth accelerated significantly. And I would say that getting to your first $100,000 of invested capital is the same way. It's slow, often boring, and can feel like a grind. But once you've reached that milestone, the momentum shifts and growing your wealth becomes significantly easier. And Bob didn't realize it at the time, but when he crossed the $100,000 mark, he was already 25% of his way to 1 million in terms of time spent to get there. That is the power of compound interest. But how does one reach this 100,000 milestone faster? The number might seem overwhelming, but it's achievable with the right approach and discipline. While there is no universal path to success, several strategies can help speed up the process. And you probably already know what needs to be done. You just haven't applied the principles yet. The first one is to start budgeting. Most people hate that word, but budgeting is the fastest and most straightforward way to free up cash and increase your savings rate right this very moment. You can start by tracking, monitoring, and categorizing all of your expenses. People often don't realize how much they're actually spending on certain things and activities until they add it all up. If you just track where you spend each dollar for at least 1 month, it should give you a pretty good idea where all of your money is truly going. Then you want to identify areas where you can cut back. There's wants and then there's needs. Make sure to separate them. Essentials like rent, groceries, and utilities are needs, while things like entertainment, dining out, or shopping for luxury items are wants. You want to reduce the non-essential spending as much as possible in order to have money left over to invest. Now, this doesn't mean giving up fun. It's more about making intentional choices and setting limits, rather than just spending money impulsively without thinking about it, and allowing your future self to reap the rewards of those actions. But one of the issues you might run into when budgeting is that it can only get you so far. Eventually, you reach a point where there's nothing left to subtract from, and there are only necessities left. While budgeting helps free up cash, increasing your income can accelerate wealth building dramatically. After all, the more money you make, the easier it is to save and invest more. So you might want to look for ways to make more money. I would say there are 3 ways to do just that. You could develop a side hustle or start a small business. You could improve your skill set and renegotiate your current salary. Or you could re-educate yourself and change your occupation to something more lucrative, or just find a better paying job in your current niche. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell you which option would be best for you since I don't know your current situation. That's something for you to figure out. Instead, I'd like to point out a common trap that people fall into when they do start making more money. And it's often the reason why they can't increase their finances their entire lives. Meet Sally. She works a job where she makes $30,000 per year. She spends roughly $25,000 to cover her essential needs: food, housing, insurance, etc. The leftover $5,000 she spends on vacations, gifts, clothes, and other non-essentials. Since she spends all of her money, she doesn't have anything left to invest at the end of the year. But then she completes a few courses and makes herself more valuable at her current job, and she negotiates a raise. Sally now makes $45,000 a year. That's $15,000 more. She finally has some money left over that she could invest. But as her income has increased, so has her standard of living. Sally now feels like she deserves a better, fancier, and more expensive car, which she buys. She can also afford to move to a bigger apartment, and she does, but that also means higher housing costs. And she can now afford to regularly eat at fancy restaurants and indulge in food delivery services. At the end of the year, Sally basically has no more money left to invest, just like she didn't have before. This phenomenon is called lifestyle inflation. It happens when you start making more money, but instead of maintaining the same lifestyle, you upgrade it. Things that were once luxuries become necessities, and you end up spending more money as a result since you need more of it just to maintain your life. This is a very common mistake I see people make all the time. But it's not about how much you make, but rather how much you're able to keep and save. And there's actually a really simple way to avoid lifestyle inflation. And that is by paying yourself first. Once they get paid, many people simply spend all that money on stupid purchases, things that are far from necessary. Whatever money is left after their impulsive buys might get invested. However, just like we've seen with Sally, the issue is that usually there's nothing left. All of their money is gone until the next paycheck, where the cycle repeats itself. Paying yourself first means to dedicate a certain percentage of your paycheck and making sure it gets invested every month before you use your money for any discretionary spending. This is just a simple tweak that works wonders, as it minimizes temptation to overspend. You can set up an automatic process that does it for you, ensuring that your financial goals are met every month. And whatever is left after investing can be spent on your wants. But make sure to pay yourself first, not the other way around. Just by being able to avoid lifestyle inflation, you're way ahead of the curve and can get compound interest working for you faster. Now, while compound interest can easily make you a millionaire, it can also work against you and make you poor. And that's because of debt. Debt is compound interest, but in terms of wealth building, in reverse. Instead of your money making you more and more, your debt is making you owe more and more money, particularly high-interest consumer debt. It should be noted, however, that certain debt can be useful. Mortgages or business loans can actually contribute to wealth building if managed correctly. However, even good debt should be handled carefully, with regular payments to avoid financial ruin. I would say that any debt that has an interest rate of over 7% has to be paid off first before you even think about investing. But of course, it also highly depends on the situation. Nonetheless, the faster you're able to reduce debt or even completely eliminate it, the better off you'll be. You'll free up money that can be redirected into investments, speeding up your journey toward financial independence. And you'll overcome one of the most significant obstacles when it comes to making money. But perhaps the most important part of wealth building might just be your mindset. To achieve financial independence, you must believe that you can do it in the first place. This belief is crucial because it drives action. If you don't believe you can save 10,000, 100,000 or retire early, you're less likely to take the necessary steps to achieve those goals. Conversely, when you believe in your financial potential, you take ownership of your journey, actively seeking opportunities to grow wealth, and embrace the habits that lead to financial independence. The journey to building wealth is rarely smooth. Market downturns, unexpected expenses, and slower than anticipated progress can easily discourage anyone. And someone with a bad financial mindset will just give up at the first obstacle. But if you believe in yourself, you will persist, even when it feels like you're making no progress. Remember, those small consistent actions such as saving $200 a month will compound into significant results over time. Now, I want to leave you with this last question. If there was a magic box where you could put in $1,000 and in 40 years you would get between $10,000 to $25,000 back, just how much money would you put in that box? My answer is as much as I can. But what will your answer be? Thanks for watching.